August 7th, 1984. We were on
Creatures
tour.
of the Night Tour.
Northern California.
Shit!
Discover the shocking truths behind your favorite musicians. From secret affairs to backstage brawls, we've got the inside story on the top 20 rumors about musicians that were totally true. But be warned, some of these rumors are so wild and outrageous that you won't believe your ears. So sit back and get ready to be blown away by the jaw-dropping secrets of your favorite rock stars. 20. Steven Tyler adopted a girl so he could date her. Julia Holcomb, a little girl, met Steven Tyler, a well-known rock star, in 1973. They had no idea that the relationship would lead to legal action almost 50 years later, since he was in his late 20s and she was just 16 when they first met. Holcomb had experienced a lot in her brief life up to that point. When Holcomb was a toddler, her mother was abandoned by her biological father. When Holcomb's new stepfather joined the picture, he too struggled with alcoholism and mental illness. At the age of 10, Holcomb's younger brother and grandfather perished in a vehicle accident when she was 13. Her mother experienced an emotional collapse as a result of the accident. Although Steven Tyler was well known for dating some of the most attractive ladies of the time, one of his most significant partnerships had rather different origins. In 1975, Tyler was granted custody of a 16-year-old groupie who had been given to him by her mother, apparently so she could accompany him across state lines on his tour. She stayed as his girlfriend and used alcohol and other controlled substances over their 3 years together. She got pregnant and had an abortion. The relationship was strained by the abortion, which contributed to their breakup when she was 18. 19. Prince went door to door as a Jehovah's Witness. Although Prince was a devout Jehovah's Witness for many years before his death, rumors that the musician would show up at random houses and teach from the Bible seemed fabricated. As it happens, they weren't. Prince said to The New Yorker in 2008, "Sometimes people act surprised, but mostly they're really cool about it." That statement may sound intriguing, but it turns out that not everyone was overjoyed by his presence. Rochelle, a woman from Minneapolis, says that Prince banging on her door was quite irritating. Over the years, he had many other door-to-door experiences. Prince himself stated, via Billboard, that while sometimes people act surprised, mostly they're really cool. However, one reporter who interviewed the musician in 2004 didn't appreciate the proselytizing he received very much. The LA Times reports that Prince would sometimes disguise himself and that the people he preached to never called him out on it. They listened to his message and respected his opinion. He described the scene as a little uncomfortable, adding that Prince became pretty intense. Nevertheless, he performed his religious duty in spite of his notoriety. 18. Michael Jackson wrote music for Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the most popular video game series ever, and many people think Michael Jackson is the greatest music star of all time. However, you might be surprised to hear that Michael Jackson composed the soundtrack for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in 1993. The origin of this rumor may be traced back to a young man who became fascinated with the similarities between the soundtracks of Sonic the Hedgehog and Michael Jackson, and thought it was more than simply a coincidence. The soundtrack composers finally acknowledged in January 2016 that the King of Pop had indeed composed music for the Sega game, after the information had only ever existed online as a rumor for years. Still, it appears that his effort was simply unacknowledged and not abandoned. Brad Buxer, a fellow musician who worked with Jackson, stated in 2009 that he answered his need for assistance on the project when Michael called him. Furthermore, he was not pleased with the sound that the console produced, which is why he is not given credit for writing the music. Michael felt it annoying that game systems at the time did not allow for the best possible sound reproduction. He was opposed to being connected to a product that diminished the value of his work. 17. Axl Rose recorded himself having intimate relations for Rocket Queen. A woman's groans may be heard in the background of the song. Rolling Stone said Adriana Smith, who was romantically involved with the band's drummer Steven Adler, was the voice behind the moaning. Smith and Adler had been dating for about a year. There's a story that Axl Rose may be heard having sex with a lady who might be Adriana Smith, the 19-year-old stripper and drummer Steve Adler's lover, on the Guns N' Roses song Rocket Queen, which rounds out the band's debut album Appetite for Destruction. According to Steve Thompson, an Appetite engineer, Axl wanted some intimate sounds on Rocket Queen, so he brought a girl in and they had sex in the studio. We wound up recording about 30 minutes of noises. If you listen to the break on Rocket Queen, it's in there. Does Adler seem to have cared? Smith claims that Adler freaked out upon learning what had transpired. I ended up drinking and using drugs over this for a really long time because I had this extreme shame and guilt and stuff, she told Rolling Stone. 16. Little Richard fired Jimi Hendrix from his backup band. Amazingly, despite coming from quite different times, eclectic frontmen Jimi Hendrix and Little Richard shared some similarities. There are some who may have unintentionally witnessed both of them perform simultaneously. However, it seems that having them perform on the same stage was a mistake. Hendrix's brother claims that when they first saw Little Richard as young teenagers, they sat there in awe. Following that, Hendrix had a disastrous military career. After he was released, he began providing backup guitar for well-known performers such as the Isley Brothers and Ike and Tina Turner. He eventually joined the Upsetters, Little Richard's support band. That was a moniker Hendrix would run with. It seems that Hendrix was not a very good team player. Backing musicians are expected to do little more than pluck a note or two, but the great showman was already attempting some of his well-known stunts, such as playing with his teeth or behind his head. During his concerts, the more well-known musician sought to be the sole noticeable performer, which led to multiple clashes with Richard. The actor felt nothing should distract attention away from his star power. The flashy guitarist had to leave. It's a fair assumption that stuff like that included outshining his boss. Little Richard's brother believes Hendrix was fired because he was always late for the bus and flirting with all the girls and stuff like that. Regretfully, both artists are known to have contributed to just 2 recordings. 15. Ozzy Osbourne will apparently bite the head off more than a bat. At a gig in Des Moines, Iowa on January 20, 1982, Osbourne chewed the head off a bat that a fan had thrown onto the stage. An attendee named Mark Neal claimed credit for providing the bat snack, although he told the Des Moines Register that the bat was already dead. Osbourne thought the bat was a toy until he placed it in his feed hole and its wings started flapping, according to Mick Wall's Black Sabbath Symptom of the Universe. Osbourne still needed to go get checked out for rabies following the show, though. Ozzy Osbourne has given numerous explanations for his version of events. Believing that it was a real rubber bat until he bit into the flying mammal, he believed a fan had thrown a fake onto the stage. Ozzy goes so far as to say he bit down on the bat's neck and felt it twitch in his jaws. Following the show, Ozzy was taken to Broadlawns Medical Center, where he was given 3 weeks of on-the-road rabies injections, as reported by the Des Moines Register in 2001. I had to find a doctor and get more rabies shots every night for the rest of the tour. 1 in each arm, 1 in each thigh, and 1 in each arse cheek. Every one was hurting like a jerk. It seems that Osbourne likes flying meat. At a meeting of executives from CBS Records in 1981, Ozzy bit the heads off of 2 live doves. Osbourne had wanted to make a big splash at the end of the conference, throwing 3 white doves into the air, according to Wall's book. Rather, Osbourne claimed that he became a little too inebriated prior to the meeting, lost his temper with the label's PR person, and crushed 2 of the doves' skulls just to shut her up. 14. Charles Manson wrote a song for the Beach Boys. This has been a persistent rumor for some time, and it is partially accurate. In an attempt to launch a singer-songwriter career, Charles Manson composed a song which he later shared with Beach Boys drummer Dennis Wilson. Manson insisted that they not make any changes to the song while they were working on it together in Wilson's studio. Manson began working with Wilson and getting involved in the Los Angeles music industry, in general because he was wanting to become recognized. Manson's only condition for the Beach Boys to finally agree to acquire his song, Cease to Exist, was that they could not alter it in any way. Yet Wilson did, quite a bit. The song ended up as a B-side after he changed the title to Never Learn Not to Love and modified the blues vibe to pure pop. The song's melody and basic structure remain the same, but Wilson altered the song's title, portions of the lyrics, and musical style before including it as the B-side of a Beach Boys album. This, along with the fact that he didn't get credit for the song, infuriated Manson. Wilson and Manson's romance quickly fell apart, and Manson started on his well-known journey to become a violent cult leader. 13. Billy Joel gives away front row tickets to real fans. There's a meme floating around asking if you know that Billy Joel gives free tickets to his shows to real fans who can only afford the cheap seats rather than charging for front row seats. Memes aren't known for being accurate, so you could reasonably conclude that it sounds too wonderful to be true. Joel, though, claims that he truly does this. He clarified his reasoning in a 2014 interview with Billboard. Joel claimed that for many years, scalpers would obtain the initially fairly priced front row seats and resell them at a steep markup. This implied that Joel would only notice wealthy individuals when he looked out at the audience members closest to him. They didn't seem to be in the correct frame of mind. Joel claims that he eventually got tired of it and wanted to know where the true fans were. Joel says that instead of getting up and cheering and getting into the music, the fat cats would just sit there as if saying, "Entertain me, piano man." The real fans were in the cheap seats, as it turned out. It was only financially feasible for the more youthful, gregarious individuals who make the most noise to sit far back. Joel claims that when the audience begins to arrive, the road crew moves to the worst seats and ushers people forward while they still hold the first row seats. He asserts that in doing this, you've got people in the front row that are really happy to be there. Real fans. 12. Graham Parsons' body was stolen. Even though millennials may not be familiar with Graham Parsons, his work with the Byrds on Sweetheart of the Rodeo, his founding of the Flying Burrito Brothers, and his 2 stunning solo albums before he passed away in Joshua Tree from alcohol and opiates, revolutionized the sound of rock and roll, alt country, and country music. As the person who led the Byrds into country rock in 1968, Parsons had achieved success. He later expanded on the new genre with the Flying Burrito Brothers and had a big impact on the Stones' iconic 1972 album Exile on Main Street thanks to his friendship with Keith Richards. Despite being a very talented singer and songwriter, he was also a troubled man who suffered greatly from his relationship with his affluent family. On September 20, 1973, 2 inebriated men with cowboy hats and rhinestone jackets drove a hearse into Los Angeles airport late at night and took the body of country rock pioneer Graham Parsons. One of the most strange journeys in the annals of music history transpired during the hours that followed. In an attempt to fulfill their agreement, friend and producer Phil Kaufman sought to sprinkle Parsons' ashes at Caprock and Joshua Tree before the body could be transported back to his home state of Louisiana. Kaufman was fined $750 for stealing Parsons' body from LAX, setting the coffin on fire with a few gasoline cans, evading police pursuit, and not being apprehended. Kaufman tried, but his efforts were not successful. In the end, Parsons' remains were returned by air and interred in New Orleans. 11. Keith Richards doesn't sleep. There is some truth to the tale, even though it isn't entirely genuine. Richards boasted in his book Life about recording the song Before They Make Me Run in 1978 over the course of 5 consecutive days without sleep in the studio, with several engineers chiming in and out. One engineer would flop under the desk and have a kip, and I'd put the other one in and keep going. He once spent 9 days without sleep, but it resulted in an injury. The Stones were in a vulnerable spot at the moment and were hard at work in the studio on Some Girls, a song that would either make or ruin the group. Though it seems absurd now, a lot of people had started to write them off and believed they were done, which is far from the case given that the group is still going strong 42 years later. Keith is thankfully no longer experiencing sleepless days or weeks. Even though he continued to use excessively during the Some Girls period, the song Beast of Burden, which is an apology to his fellow musicians for being a burden to one another, helped the Stones turn the corner and solidify their ongoing fraternal bond. 10. Elvis really did insult his backup singers in the catfish incident. The book, What the Great Ate, claims that Elvis detested fish to the point of insanity, particularly the smell. He requested that his wife never eat fish while they were together since he felt it was so horrible. On July 20, 1975, during a concert in Virginia, this disdain turned into a major issue. Elvis, according to Virginia Living, was in a dangerous mood for someone armed with a microphone that evening before having a meltdown. He began by complaining that he was being breathed on by 12,000 people. Then he complained that he smelled onions and green peppers. The tipping point came when he turned around and claimed that his 4 backing vocalists had been eating catfish. It was clearly aggressive, but no one knew exactly what he meant when he said it. Ever since he broke up with one of the women, he had turned to hurling insults at them. 3 backup singers left the stage because they felt there was an ugly undertone to the catfish comment, as well as to his whole demeanor. Many believe there was a racist undertone to the slur. The catfish incident was arguably the lowest point in Elvis's career. A performance review noted that tension among the fans was noticeable. Elvis offered just one response to the outburst. I thought it was funny. 9. Van Morrison recorded 30 songs in a single day. Van Morrison, a Northern Irish artist who had been releasing music for decades, doesn't seem to slow down as he gets older. In fact, since 2016 alone, he has released no fewer than 6 new albums. That was nothing, though, compared to the exuberantly inventive day in the 1960s when the frontman of Them recorded 30 songs in a single day, more than some musicians record in a decade. In the thick of all the gossip about their personal lives, it may be easy to forget that musicians, and Van Morrison foremost among them, are actually rather good at what they do. The legendary songwriter has written some of the greatest songs in history, but one day in 1967, he exceeded even his own expectations. Morrison was caught in a recording contract he detested for the duration of that year, yet he owed executives 36 songs. Instead of standing around, he entered the studio and created 30 dreadfully terrible songs that he dubbed revenge songs, officially fulfilling his commitment. What a jerk. 8. Keith Moon and Mama Cass died in the same room. The most persistent myth of Mama Cass's passing is that she choked to death on a ham sandwich. This, according to the book Beautiful Idiots and Brilliant Lunatics, is an absolute fabrication. Even though there is a much wilder tale regarding her death and the death of the Who drummer Keith Moon, that legend still endures. At age 32, they both passed away. Their bad lifestyles played a part in both of their deaths. The strangest thing of all was that they passed away in the same room. When Harry Nilsson, the singer, was out of town, he lent his London apartment to pals. It was borrowed by Cass Elliot, who was once with the Mamas and the Papas while she was doing a run of shows at the London Palladium. She went home after her final performance, had a glass of champagne, and went to bed. Her heart had been weakened by years of crash dieting, though, and that night it gave up. She suffered a heart attack while in bed. Moon rented the apartment from Nilsson 4 years later. Moon awoke one morning, took 32 Heminevrin tablets, and ate a steak while watching a movie. The tablets were intended to curb the raging alcoholism of the drummer, who was taking them for urges. However, the suggested daily dose was merely 3 pills. The amount proved lethal, and Moon's body was discovered in bed in the same room that Mama Cass had passed away in by his lover. For Nilsson, who thought the apartment was cursed, this was too much. He relocated to Los Angeles after selling it. 7. If you bought the first Kiss comic book, you've got blood on your hands. The members of Kiss resemble characters from comic books, even down to the titles given to their makeup-enabled personas. Gene Simmons' Demon, Paul Stanley's Starchild, Ace Frehley's Spaceman, and Peter Criss's Catman. Marvel Comics published their first comic book with a Kiss theme in 1977, after sensibly seeing a chance for synergy. The word got out that Kiss members gave a unique aspect of themselves, their own blood, to the comic book. It was said that the ink used in the Kiss comic book contained a little amount of the band members' vital fluids. In Kiss Official magazine, Simmons, who frequently spat fake blood from his mouth during Kiss concerts, attested to the veracity of the information. Blood was drawn, added to the ink, and the entire thing was certified by the most rock and roll person in the world, a notary public. Someone came up with the idea of putting real blood in the ink, Simmons said, adding that he and his bandmates flew up to Buffalo to Marvel's printing plant where they pour the ink and make the comic books. Kiss fans who purchased the book were also treated to exclusive interviews, behind-the-scenes photos, and more. Blood on the Plates, a 4-page column written by writer Stark Raven, explores the kinds of sacrifices an artist should be expected to make for their work, and concludes that this process forged a special relationship with readers. When this magazine goes to press, those vials will be lovingly poured into the vats of ink, making this the first comic book ever to be printed in blood. A bond exists, now and forevermore, among Kiss, their fans, and Marvel Comics. A blood brotherhood of truth, justice, and rock and roll. 6. Jerry Lewis married his 13-year-old cousin. Apparently, Bill Wyman wasn't the only one who liked his wives to be young. In 1958, Lewis was about to take over as the most famous figure in rock and roll, just as Elvis was being called up to serve in the military. But then his personal life intervened. Before leaving on his European tour, Lewis wed Myra Gale Brown, his first cousin's 13-year-old daughter. Disgusted, his admirers swarmed the stages when they learned about it. Years would pass before his reputation turned around. According to Lewis's obituary in the Times, the hitmaker of Whole Lotta Shakin' Goin' On and Great Balls of Fire eloped with Myra Gale Brown in December 1957. Their romance began when he moved into the Memphis home of Myra's father, J.W. Brown, a bass player and cousin of Lewis. When it was revealed that Williams, then 13 years old, was also Lewis's second cousin, and that Lewis had been married to Jane Mitchum, his second wife, when they were married, the media lashed out at the 22-year-old. Lewis's tour was abruptly canceled as a result of the disclosure. Radio stations banned him, and his income suddenly decreased. Throughout his hometown of Faraday, Louisiana, young people married. He got married for the first time at the age of 16 and married 7 times throughout his lifetime. During that period, he kept on making music records and giving theater performances, and he made a comeback roughly 10 years later. 5. Led Zeppelin's drummer died after drinking 40 shots of vodka. Led Zeppelin is rumored to have been the subject of more rumors than any other band in history. Their adventures are fabled, though often only in mythology. Sadly, not every wild tale circulated about the gang is accurate. And even more tragically, the story of their drummer's final day is true. Almost incredible. According to legend, John Bonham, Wright, drank 40 shots of vodka before passing away. That statistic is enough to make even the most ardent alcoholic shake their head in shock. However, that is accurate. In September 24, 1980, the drummer began drinking at a pub around noon, downing 4 to 5 quadruple vodkas with orange. His assistant drove him to the studio, where Jimmy Page reported that Bonham was pretty tipsy. After that, he had another 2 or 3 vodka oranges. This information is based on a modern Guardian article. He practiced for a while, then headed over to Page's place. For 4 hours, every hour, Bonham had a couple of large vodka oranges. He finally passed asleep at midnight, at which point his helper took him to bed. His body began to flush out the poison over the night, but he was so inebriated that he didn't wake up. Sadly, he breathed in vomit and passed away. The next morning, Bonham's body was discovered by the band's manager. His blood alcohol content, according to tests, was 0.276. The permissible driving level is under 0.08. Rolling Stone reported that Bonham had taken the equivalent of 40 shots of vodka that day, based on the coroner's report. Yes, then, consider this to be true. 4. Iggy Pop checked into a mental hospital. Crazy anecdotes about David Bowie and Iggy Pop abound. The fact that the first is referred to as the godfather of punk, and the second, who frequently changed his identity, went by many monikers, including Thin White Duke, suggests that these guys were well known and had the wherewithal to get away with almost anything. In the tale we're going to discuss today, Iggy Pop had the choice between going to jail or into a mental health facility when he let himself go a bit too far. One person was insane enough to break out of the lunatic unit and give his pal some gifts, even though his main goal was to overcome his drug addiction. Iggy Pop was battling addictions and his career in 1974. In an attempt to turn his life around, he checked himself into the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. In an interview with Blender in 2002, Bowie talked about going to see his friend. He clarified, saying, "We knew he wasn't well, so we trooped into the hospital with a load of drugs for him. We reasoned that because it was likely days since he had taken any medications, we should bring them to him." Thankfully, Bowie's relationship helped Iggy get over his breakup and continue with his profession, even though drugs were not permitted in the facility and the personnel would not allow Bowie to bring them inside. 3. Christine McVie wrote a song about having an affair, told her husband it was about her dog. You would probably take all necessary steps to hide an affair if you were having one, right? That memo did not reach Christine McVie. You Make Loving Fun, penned and performed by the Fleetwood Mac singer, peaked at number 9 on the album Rumors. The song, which has the well-known chorus, "I Never Did Believe in Miracles," was about her relationship with Curry Grant, the band's lighting director. It has been called a charming homage to the fleeting romance. John McVie was there next to her in the studio, playing bass on it. To keep the peace, McVie told him that despite the tumultuous nature of their divorce, the songs were about her dog. It went on to become a huge hit and peaked at number 10 in the USA. After some time, the McVies were able to patch things up and continue to be friends. 2. Nikki Sixx was declared dead at one point. Motley Crue members were on top of the globe in 1987. Millions of CDs sold out concerts, private planes, and a lifestyle of excess and revelry that went beyond what was considered acceptable even for rock stars. However, the band's reckless way of life was starting to catch up with them. On December 8, 1984, while under the influence of booze and narcotics, singer Vince Neil entered his car. While driving, his car slammed into another, killing percussionist Hanoi Rocks Razzle, who was seated next to him, and brain damaging the other 2 occupants. This horrifying mishap was meant to be a warning sign for Motley Crue members, but it appears that the exact reverse occurred. Nikki Sixx's heroin addiction intensified, reaching its zenith on the evening of December 23, 1987. Rumor has it that Nikki Sixx, the bassist and co-founder of Motley Crue, was declared dead at one point in his career. This, as it happens, was a true story, the product of a drug-fueled evening in 1987 when Sixx overdosed on heroin and collapsed. He had overdosed on heroin before, but this one was different. Instead of turning blue, he was pronounced dead inside an ambulance. He miraculously awoke at the hospital, where he quickly made his getaway and found a ride home to continue his heroin use. Play it fast and loose. 1. The reason why David Bowie had heterochromia. David Bowie seemed almost otherworldly when he first rose to fame in the early 1970s. Like his alter persona, Ziggy Stardust, he appeared to be an alien with his deathly pale complexion, brilliantly colored hair, and downright strange attire. It was definitely fascinating to look into David Bowie's eyes. In case you haven't noticed previously, his eyes appeared to have two distinct colors. The disorder known as heterochromia, which causes a person to have two distinct iris colors, was thought to be the cause of this. It is more frequent in cats and dogs than in people, is innocuous, and is inherited. The late music icon, however, had pupils that were two different diameters rather than heterochromia. Bowie was hit in the left eye during a quarrel over a girl in 1962 with George Underwood, who would go on to become his lifelong artistic partner. Bowie's eye was scratched during the altercation, immobilizing the iris contracting muscles. And there you have it, the top 20 rumors about musicians that were totally true. We hope you enjoyed watching the wild and crazy lives of your favorite rock stars. But before you go, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content like this. And if you have any rumors of your own that you'd like us to investigate, be sure to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.